Hey folks, everything new under the sun timeline of the return of the Lord. It includes many things, and one of those things that I believe leads us into a situation where the Antichrist can come into power, convince the whole world to take a mark of the beast and bow down and worship him, is global war, global economic collapse or crisis, and maybe even some great medical emergency. Well, I wouldn't normally do as many videos, but this came up, and the news is just flying now as it relates to Russia, Ukraine. This is a big deal, and it is one of the big triggers, the one of the items that I believe kicks off what I believe to be the revealing, at least to the Christians, of the Antichrist and the rising to power of the Antichrist, and the reason for which he can gain control of the world. When the world is brought to its knees via medical emergency, war, and famine, although it will get worse, when the world is brought to its knees, it is much more willing to accept a world leader, a world government, a global control, a loss of all sovereignty of nations. When people are desperate, they'll do desperate things, and they will accept that sort of tyranny and totalitarianism. And we've seen it very easy with the takeover, with the lockdowns, etc. The public was all too ready and too happy to give up their rights and their freedoms. And the big thing I want to talk about again tonight is war with Russia. You can see on the timeline of the Return of the Lord, Ezekiel 38, War of Gog Magog, a first fulfillment of that. Isaiah 17, destruction of Damascus. These are things which, again, I think tip the scale towards a world that is then brought to its knees and ready to accept this world leader. So let's take a look at this article. Is someone about to light the match which will spark a war with Russia? This is a big deal now. I don't know if you've been following the news, but Russia has been amassing troops on Ukraine's border. Ukraine has been amassing troops as well. The big deal is that Russia doesn't want Ukraine to be accepted into NATO, and NATO keeps threatening, Russia, stay back, we're going to accept them into NATO, and that means if you go to war against Ukraine, you'll have to go to war against NATO and all the countries that are in NATO, including the United States. But Russia just wants a buffer. Russia wants to rebuild Mother Russia and to get back all the countries that were originally included in Mother Russia in the Soviet Union, and they want a buffer with all the NATO states that are surrounding them. And there's several strategic reasons for it. But this is a big deal, and now we're talking about cyber attacks that are occurring, and no one quite knows who is perpetrating them. But let's take a look at this article here. Western leaders seem to think they can just keep provoking Russians over and over again without any consequences. It was pretty obvious that Western hands were behind the recent riots in Kazakhstan. Remember the riots in Kazakhstan? That Russian military went in and they stomped it out? It says, and now the head of NATO has come out and publicly said that a decision has already been made to make Ukraine and Georgia members of NATO. He's referring to a decision that was made many years ago, but publicly reaffirming the decision in this exceedingly tense environment is extremely counterproductive. Basically, to threaten Russia again with the fact that Ukraine might become part of NATO would again get Russians and Putin's back up and maybe want to rattle the sabers against NATO and the United States to dissuade them to put off that introduction into NATO. The Russians have repeatedly warned that adding Ukraine to NATO is a red line that must never be crossed, and unlike many Western leaders, Russian officials tend to be deadly serious about their red line. Unfortunately, it appears that the time for peacemaking may be coming to an end on Friday. Foreign Minister Lavrov told the press that Russia has run out of patience. Remember the wars and the rumors of wars the Bible speaks about in the last days, and think about what would be required to be happening in the world that would cause everybody to give up their national sovereignty, to give up their currencies, to give up everything to accept a world leader, a world government, and a mark of the beast. They have to be absolutely desperate at that time. And that desperation comes out of supply chain issues, economic collapse, and even war, where people are saying, please, let's just have peace in the world. We can't have any more things upon us. We can't have famine and pandemic upon us anymore. We just need peace. If we can just have peace in the world and come together as a nation, as a world, as a world body, then everything can be great and we can live in peace and harmony. Well, that just sounds like Tower of Babel, doesn't it? Go read the story about the Tower of Babel. Well, Russia has run out of patience with the games Western leaders are playing. Foreign Minister Lavrov says run out of patience with the West and expects a written response to its demands for security guarantees within a week after diplomatic talks with NATO and the United States failed to make headway on the issue amid a buildup of Russian troops. So we're getting very close. And I've been sitting on this story. This has been around for years, where Russia has been on the border. There's been saber rattling. They've been threatening this and that, but it seems to be coming to a head now. And so now I'm not sitting on it anymore. Now this is why I'm bringing it to you, and even bringing it to you tonight. As I was reading it, I think it's getting close to something happening, and this is why you need to be prepared for so many things. Hedge your bets, if you will. Be ready for any sort of situation. If a war starts, and this would be World War III of sorts, with NATO being involved going against Russia, this would probably cause economic collapse. If this is it, then you need to be prepared ahead of time, because remember, supply chains are already locking up, slowing down. You can't get things that you need, computer components, chips. You can't get various things from China that you expected to get. And not a lot of manufacturing currently is in North America. It will take years and years to wind up the manufacturing base that used to exist in North America to produce all the goods that North Americans need and use every day. So this is a big deal. Says, will the Russians make a move? According to Lavrov, if Western leaders are not serious about coming to an agreement with the Russian government, it will consider all options. Lavrov said Russia, too, wants the standoff over security in Europe to be resolved with mutual respect and balance of interest, but warned it will consider various options to respond if the West spurns Russia's security proposals. The writer goes on to say, I don't know why corporate media in the West is not paying more attention to this, because it's a really big story. This is a really big story in Europe. There is a lot of heat built up here, a lot of pressure. You have the energy crisis in Europe. Energy relies on Russia, but now Europe would now have to go to war against Russia if NATO became involved in this. And Ukraine is desperately saying, please let us into NATO and protect us. And Russia, just like in Crimea, has the ability and has shown in the past that they're willing to go and take over land that they want, and to protect their borders and to protect their sovereignty. And if they need to go to war against NATO, I think they will do that. And this is a cyber attack. Remember Cyber Polygon? Remember the thing that we were talking about, that they were drilling? The big warning was the next big thing after the pandemic will be cyber attacks and cybersecurity. That's going to be the next thing. That's going to bring down the world economy. That's going to bring down the internet. That's going to cause an internet outage for days. That's going to cause a banking holiday. This is what Klaus Schwab warned about. So you can go watch my videos on Operation Cyber Polygon, just like Event 201, which happened prior to the pandemic. But within 24 hours, the government websites in Ukraine were hit with a massive cyber attack. So are we seeing a ramp up in cyber attacks? Yes, and this is what I said with Cyber Polygon. You're going to see a slow increase in cyber attacks, and you're going to see one that is large enough, maybe this year, to even take down the internet, to move us into a situation of a bank holiday. This is what Klaus Schwab said himself, and wouldn't a bank holiday be quite a convenient option if we want to move over to some sort of one world currency or a new world reserve currency? Absolutely. So when you start hearing about cyber attacks, perk up your ears, pay attention, recognize how this is going to affect the whole world. Ukraine was hit by a cyber attack that splashed a warning across government websites to be, what are they saying? afraid and expect the worst. Now, doesn't that sound like something that came out of the pandemic? Isn't this what our mainstream media and our government leaders were telling us? Be afraid and expect the worst. This is exactly what the tagline was as it relates to the pandemic. It says, well, so be afraid and expect the worst, while Russia, which has amassed 100,000 troops on its neighbor's frontier, released pictures of more of its forces on the move. So now you're talking about propaganda. They're saying things, they're putting things out in the media, they're sharing. There's a propaganda campaign where we involved and put through a propaganda campaign as it relates to the pandemic. Absolutely. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. So I will tell you, keep your eyes wide open, keep your ears open, pay attention to several different news agencies and people paying attention and reporting on this. Also, read your Bible. See what your Bible says about battles in the last days and wars and the state of the world in the last days. And I believe it talks exactly about this sort of thing. Were the Russians behind the cyber attack? Is entirely possible, but of course it is also possible that it was a work of Western intelligence agencies. At this point, it's not really clear. Also, within the last 24 hours, the Pentagon has accused Russians of getting ready to launch a false flag. Now, Biden's favorite punching bag, and really the Democrats, has always been the Russians. And remember Hillary Clinton, it's the Russians. The Russians are helping Trump. It's the Russians. Russians are the big boogeyman. So the fact that the Pentagon could be doing this would make a lot of sense from the Democratic point of view. But there you go. There's lots of strange things that happen that we won't know until we get probably into heaven and say, that was a false flag, that was a false flag, or that was going on, and that was collusion, and that was pre-planned and organized, and there's probably a lot of things that are going on in this world we don't really know about. Press Secretary John Kirby said the Defense Department has credible information indicating that Russia has pre-positioned a group of operatives to execute an operation designed to look like an attack on them or Russian-speaking people in Ukraine in order to create a reason for potential invasion. So again, you've got the propaganda from both sides doing psychological warfare, trying to convince you of something, putting thoughts in your head about what could be happening and who is behind these things. The allegation echoed a statement released by Ukraine's Ministry of Defense on Friday, which said that Russian special forces are preparing provocations against Russian forces in an attempt to frame Ukraine. All right, so this is heating up. Western leaders seem to want this confrontation with Russia. NATO Secretary General, Hans Stoltenberg, just publicly reaffirmed the fact that a decision to add Ukraine to NATO has already been made. So again, why would he be upsetting Russia by bringing this out? Russia knows this already, that this decision was maybe set in motion a while back. Why are they saying this again? To let Russia know that they're holding the line? I don't know, but it certainly has the potential to push Russia over the edge. Why would he say such a thing? Does he want to push the Russians over the edge? Now the Russian media has learned of his comments. They're going to have a field day. Nobody I would know wants a war with Russia, but if the American people don't wake up and start objecting to the foolishness that is going on, we might just get one. All right, is this going to affect the economy? Well, look at this. Biden administration is even publicly telling us that they plan to do what they plan to do if they are successful in provoking the Russians into an invasion of Ukraine. Biden administration plans to hit them with some really tough sanctions. And what are economic sanctions against Russia going to do? That's going to cause them to lock down and stop the energy flow to Europe. That's going to put Europe in a pinch. Europe is going to be in a desperate situation. There's going to be economic collapse and civil collapse, and all nations will start going to war then at that point over energy. And this is all related to economic collapse. So one thing causes the other. It's a domino effect. So I don't think this can be said too lightly. You need to be prepared for significant trouble ahead. If U.S. officials believe that a Russian invasion is imminent, the best thing to do would be leave them guessing about a response. Fear of the unknown could be a powerful thing. But if the Russians know precisely how the U.S. will respond, that actually makes a Russian invasion far more likely. Joe Biden is surrounded by the worst foreign policy team in U.S. history. This is what the writer says, and that is saying a lot. He says, at this hour, tensions continue to rise, and Russia continues to be very alarming, to conduct very alarming military exercises. It's all propaganda, fear campaign. What happened during the pandemic? It was a great fear campaign, wasn't there? Propaganda, militaries of the world, Canadian military, admitted that there was a campaign, a psychological campaign against Canadians, and the fact that they, even the government, tracked civilian cell phone data to confirm that we were all respecting lockdown. So this is not new information to anybody who's paying attention. This is all released in mainstream media that the quote-unquote Western democratic countries are doing this. So when you look at what is going on behind the scenes that they're not telling you about, you probably need to have a seat and be ready for any sort of thing. He says, for years I've been warning about a steady deterioration in U.S. relations with Russia. And now the events appear to be building up to a crescendo. So there's massive instability. There's energy troubles already. So Europe doesn't really want to cause too much trouble with Russia. They have pipelines coming from Russia, and it's a cold winter, and they're in a energy crunch. But this is happening right now. Probably it's to Russia's advantage to ratchet up the price of energy, natural gas, etc., and to make a big a new deal with Europe as a whole. And so this all plays to their advantage, and Putin is playing this to his advantage, certainly. But it does raise the specter of war in the Middle East. That's rising as well, but in Europe, which is going to drag NATO into it, which means you and I, if you're in the United States, if you're in Canada, that means we're going to get dragged into this as well, because the deal is, if you're part of NATO, it's one for all and all for one, basically. If one country gets attacked, it's an attack on all countries, and you have the definition of World War III at that point. I believe we'll get to a precipice where there may be some fighting, there may be some offense occurring, but a world leader will step into the picture and he will say, peace, peace, everybody. I'm going to make everything awesome again. And as long as we all come together, you all accept this mark, and we're going to make everything awesome. And he's going to create peace in the world and in the Middle East specifically for a period of 7 years, at the midpoint of which he's going to break that covenant, sit on the throne in the third temple, declaring that he is God, causing the abomination of desolation. That is the red line for God. That triggers the wrath of God to come. And so this 7-year period, I think, is going to kick off really, really soon. We're in a Shemitah year from September 2021 to September 2022. And many believe Rosh Hashanah is the kickoff of that 7-year period. That means a lot of stuff has to happen in 22. And does it look like a lot of stuff is going to happen in 2022? I would suggest to you that indeed it does look like a lot of stuff is going to happen. So buckle up, pay attention, get into your word, get into Bible prophecy so you know what's coming. If you're sitting in church and you're listening to your pastor, he's probably not going over a lot of this stuff, because a lot of this can be seen as hearsay or conjecture. Or other things, and they only want to deal specifically what's within the Bible, and there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that sometimes you don't realize things are right upon you, just as the Bible described, and world events are happening all around you. So thanks for watching, folks. I'll leave it there, and you let me know in the comments what you think is going to come of this. We'll see you in the next video.